Hi, Steve Hayes here, and welcome to Days Are Getting Better, episode 33. I'll be talking today a little bit about the World Conference of the Association of Contextual Behavioral Science that happened in Buenos Aires and some of the things that I'm excited about to see from spending a week there in the first South American WorldCon. I might say a sentence or two about sending my son off to college, about to leave within the next hour to get on a plane. And my wife and I are excited about it and also looking at each other saying, yipes, now we're empty nesters. I want to talk about an article that has just been published. It's open access, and there will be a link below. And if you get my newsletter, it'll be a link there as well. For a report on the history of ACT and the first 1,000 randomized trials. I always stumble over that number, 1,000 randomized trials, and what those RCTs show. I'll mention a little bit about an exciting new thing that I'm trying to do to support the charitable organization I'm president of, IBH, with a Patreon account, and where that money will go and why it matters. I'm going to just mention the summit that's coming up, but in a pretty constrained way, because I've been sending out a number of emails about that and about its link to Cycflex, the app, and MindGrapher, the app that I've been working on. And finally, I might have a comment or two about developing interaction with a person you may know. All that, maybe a couple more things in this episode. So let's get to it. WorldCon, you actually can't say that because it turns out there's a comic convention that uses WorldCon, so we can't put it in writing. But the World Conference of the Association for Contextual Behavioral Science happened in Buenos Aires. It's been going on since 2003 in Linköping, so we're now into, this is, I think, technically the 22nd. And it was sold out almost a month before the event because people came from all around South America and some from the rest of the world. And it had a different feel, a really exciting feel, and it really lifted me up. If you come into a WorldCon, you will immediately feel the quality of the community, because the experiential training that helps you focus on acceptance and openness and non-judgment and more mindful awareness and a values-based journey, those things are in the interactions that are in the hallways and in the sessions and so forth. There's a kind of a softness to it and a support to it and a joy to it that is unusual and infectious. And boy, you combine that with Latinx culture, and oh my goodness, it was just so fun. I came home with my Paraguay soccer shirt with number 10 and my name on the back. I came with a Messi soccer shirt from Argentina and a really cool embroidered bag from Peru, and on I went. I shouldn't be mentioning it because some people will probably feel that disappointed I didn't mention theirs, but people were very kind and sharing little things that I could fit in my suitcase. Thank you. There were just memories of it. Both Spanish and Portuguese were in all of the, not all of them, but many of the demonstrations. I'm going to include in our YouTube stream and X the example of what I did in the Follies, which is a ritual that we have on the night before the conference ends every time, making fun of each other, not of other people so much. And so I hope you take a moment to look at that. My son Stevie, who's headed off to Purdue to learn computer science and game design, used his technical skills to do the graphics and the visuals and the special effects that are pretty darn cool. I did the words and music, so check out the Follies. Um, the occasion of sending my son off to college, really what that focuses on is the finitude of life and of how we can support each other in creating a better world. And I've come to believe that we really need to do that in a way that takes down some of the mistakes that we've made from the past, especially, I think, the ones that are embedded in psychology, and because that's where I am and what I have influence over, and how we've drawn the entire world to think of in terms of normative categories instead of empowerment processes. That's very much what we're trying to fix with PsychFlex and MindGrapher. And if you've been getting emails from me, about wanting to draw you into that, that's why. It's not because I'm in it for the money. I haven't made any money from that. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm in it for the possibility that we can learn how to focus on individuals. And so my words to my son as he heads off have been very much about being true to himself and what he really wants, and learning how to build a life that moves you in the direction that you really care about. And I think the psychological flexibility processes, when scaled to socially and biologically, really give you a big leg up on as to how to do that. The challenge for us is that we're really off on the leading edge, if not the bleeding edge, because most of the tools we've developed analytically and culturally are built around normative categories. And you've heard me in previous episodes, The Days Are Getting Better, pointing out how limited those can be. So I have launched a Patreon account through IBH, and there's a little QR code and a link and so forth in the down below, and it'll be in the newsletter if you get it that way. And what every single penny, if you do decide to support the Patreon account, will go to the charitable organization IBH. Not a single penny will come to me. I give them money, not take any money from them. And it will go to developing the tech that will allow us to follow people and have them report what they're doing in their life, and then modeling that and trying to give clear nudges and bumps that lift up the places where people have gone awry. Because while we know that the psychological flexibility processes, being more open, aware, and actively engaged in life, scaling that to your body and to your relationships, we know that takes the lion's share of what we know about how change happens. It turns out that each person has to put it together in their own way for their own purposes, one at a time. It's like assembling a puzzle where each puzzle box contains an individual puzzle. Yeah, it's the same basic strategies of putting together the pieces, and some of the pieces are similar, but the sequences are different, and the places people stumble are different. If you do decide to support the Patreon account, you'll get access immediately to a thing called the Personalized Life Assessment Network tool that will allow you to put in things that you think are linked to things that you want to change in your life, and it'll put it into a little network where you can step back and see it. Very, very simple tool, really fun to play with. I did a demonstration at WorldCon with my colleague, Geis Janssen, and he had put together a network. We did it together on stage. And in the network was something that a biochemist realized indicated that he had a very, very serious form of bacterial infection in his gut. I won't steal my own thunder or his thunder by telling that story now. I'll do that in the next episode perhaps. But what it shows is that we need analytic tools that will allow us to see things not just at the psychological level, but also the biological level and at the social level in terms of a complex system that applies to an individual. Well, we can't be experts in everything. We can't possibly. But AI can. And if we feed it with the right kind of data, with the wearables, the things we've all gotten used to. I look at my steps taken every day or what's happening with my AFib, or I do that routinely. You probably do too. Your sleep patterns, etc. Psychology needs to catch up on that. And so that's exactly what Mindgrapher is going to do. And if you do support the Patreon account, every single penny will go to building the tech that will allow us to model individual lives and to empower them instead of just putting them in normative categories, which is a very crude and I think illegitimate, scientifically illegitimate way to know how to be of help. I said that I would talk about the first 1,000 randomized trials, and I'm already getting into a longer Days Are Getting Better episode. But let me just quickly orient you towards what you'll see if you read this open access article. It's not too geeky. You can have fun with it. Look at the figures. Go to the appendices. There's a whole bunch of other figures. What the article does is walk through a little bit about the history of ACT and some of the earliest documents, what they show. And part of that argument is just so that people understand that these new things we're doing, like idionomic analysis or focusing on processes of change, are not new at all. They're more than 40 years old. It's what the journey has been about from the beginning, and not because I invented it, I tweaked it, yeah. And it did come out of a single lab, which makes it easy to understand the developmental history. No, it really comes out of behavior analytic thinking, and especially the more contextual and functional wing of that. But after that little orientation, what the article does is it simply categorizes the content of those first randomized controlled trials. And here's a few things that might really interest you that you'll see if you get into this article that I'm attaching. Go to the population studied in the first 1,000 RCTs on ACT. And, if you just look at the growth, you'll see that, 2004, when I said, the third wave is coming, we had 4 RCTs, or maybe 5, depending how you count. If the latest batch is put down, I think the website within a month or so is going to show almost 1,300. But it's happening every 2 or 3 days. We get a new RCT. That's just the pace now. So in the first 1,000, what do you think? What percentage do you think would be focused on DSM disorders of a traditional kind of mental health sort? And the answer is 21%. 21%. And even if you get really liberal, you can push it up to a third. Really liberal meaning if you even took a measure of some of the, never mind targeting a particular syndrome, but if you even took measures that are kind of classic anxiety, depression kind of measures, you get up there around a third. But it's really fair, I think the more accurate figure is about 21%, where people are targeting panic disorder or major depression or things of that kind. What do you think the bigger chunk would be if it's only 21%? Well, I'll give you the answer. 42% of the studies are on physical health issues and the behavioral and psychological challenges of stepping up to that. All of those things in behavioral health. And that could include medical illness, physical impairment, dealing with cancer or multiple sclerosis and so on. It could include diet, exercise, sleep, behavioral health matters. It could include chronic pain. 42%, twice as much as the DSM. How about the rest? What do you think it is? It's social and environmental issues. Coping with major events and hardships, or what's going on in the workplace or in academic areas, or athletic concerns, or being a parent or a caregiver or a teacher, and social concerns just quite directly, prejudice, dealing with the effect of prejudices, and so on. So I'm pretty proud of the fact that, by the way, the number there is 36%, that if you think of all the things that people need in the world, and then you think, okay, a psychotherapy. ACT is not just a psychotherapy. But if you think that, only 21% is focused on the classic syndromes. Twice that on physical and behavioral health. And over a third on social and environmental issues. Now, if you read the article, you see that's not by accident. It comes from the Skinnerian functional contextual wing, or as I would usually say it with a little smile, from rats to Walden 2. Walden 2 is what brought me into that wing. I'm a Maslow guy, peak experiences, etc., but I didn't think he could get there scientifically, and that the humanistic sensibilities need to be harnessed to a modern process-based approach. And I continue to believe that by focusing on the individual and developing concepts that about how to empower their journey, we can scale from rats to Walden 2. I mean, the first so-called idionomic concepts, ones that are derived by looking at the individual and then scaling to a collective, the first ones are things like reinforcement, stimulus control. It's just that we didn't have it with cognition. And I think now we really do. If you jump over into the mental health and just say, where is the primary focus? Yeah, it's depression and it's anxiety and social anxiety and so forth. But I'm also proud of the fact that it's the seriously mental ill, schizophrenia, and issues of that kind. That we have not, shied away from some of the most difficult problems. It includes things like body image, or trichotillomania, or OCD, and on it goes. So that's kind of cool too. If you look at the physical health and behavioral health areas, some of these are behavioral addictions and things of that kind. But then there's things just like health behaviors, or going to the dentist, or dental hygiene, or weight loss, and on it goes. One of the things that is also true, when you get 1,000 randomized trials, you can easily think, oh, there's not very much on this and very much on that, when actually, if you only have 6%, well, that's 60 studies. And so if you look at things like online work, apps, websites, things that would scale, because once you start scaling out to any problem, you start thinking, we're going to have to reach not just 1 out of 5 people, which nobody knows how to do with our mental health system. 5 out of 5 people need support and mental resilience training. And how are you going to do it? You're going to have to use tech. I don't think it should substitute for personal relationships. I think it should empower that. But they're almost 10% of the 1,000 randomized trials are dealing with those kinds of issues. So that's 100 studies. And finally, I'll just mention 2 things. In terms of quality, because sometimes people say, oh yeah, there's a lot of research, but it's not high quality. The same thing applies. Do you know that there's more than 60 randomized trials published in journals that have an impact factor of 6 or above? And after this first 1,000 trials, we had just recently, within the last 3 months, we've had 2 Lancet studies. Lancet has an impact factor of 170, or JCCP, the biggest clinical psych journal there is, I think it's 7. It's even higher than New England Journal or the Journal of American Medical Association. Lancet is the highest impact biopsychosocial journal in the world. We've had 2 just in the last 2 months, a fibromyalgia app and a study that I mentioned in earlier days are getting better, of motor neuron disease. And before that, a wonderful study in World Psychiatry, the highest impact psychiatry journal in the world, on the World Health Organization rollout of ACT self-help, called Self-Help Plus. The final thing I'll mention on the 1,000 randomized trials is 45% or so come from lower and middle income countries. So if you hear people saying, oh, this is just for, educated elite in the Western countries, no, dude, that's not true. And the reason is that we've built this work to focus on processes that are universal. And we've shied away from anything that would squeeze it down. Yes, we're interested in values, but we're not going to tell you what those values are. And that's a huge mistake that I think some of the positive psychology folks have made, of listing the right values. You don't have any right to do that. For goodness sakes, if you're dealing with Indigenous peoples in Canada, they have something like a 7-factor theory of values. You would never know that unless you're part of the tribes. It's just not going to happen. And you don't, so we have built processes in such a way and linked to a basic theory that I think is the equivalent of things like reinforcement and stimulus control, relational frame theory, that makes sense of these complex human processes. So read the 1,000 Trial article, see what you think, and take a little peek at the very, very end. I did a little rant on Sonny Turner in my last days of getting better, and I do that again at the end of this article. A very, very sweet and wonderful man, and a kind of a sweet and sad story. So you're part of something. If you're part of the ACT community, the ACBS community, or if you're just following me, you're part of something that goes back, 100 years, and will go forward. Not in a particular way, and I'm not saying that in a grabby way. Everyone will be forgotten. That's not the issue. The issue is let's do something that lasts and that builds and that gives people the tools they need. I said I would mention something about the summit, and the final thing I did want to mention is there's a really cool session coming up with Rick Hansen. Rick Hansen, Buddha's brain, is a sort of a neuropsych-oriented guy who is interested in mindfulness and has really kind of married those two up. But he's followed the ACT literature, which I didn't know. And so I've been at just a really cool series of conversations with him lately. And we're going to do a 2-hour conversation. It'll be as part of the summit, but we're thinking about actually making it available to anybody, even if you don't, decide to buy the summit. You know about that. If you're on my newsletter list, and if you don't, there'll be links down below, and you can find out how you can get the whole thing. 40 people, more than 60 hours of content, really wonderful things that will be rolled out September 9th through the 13th or 12th, Monday through Friday. And Rick and I are going to do a 2-hour conversation. And I really am excited to see what will happen there in our Zoom conversations and our personal meetings. We've just had a lot of fun exploring how the mindfulness and neuro folks and the ACT folks can kind of connect up and empower each other. And so I'm just mentioning that, and keep your eye out for it. If you do, oh golly, I'm into a commercial, but if you do decide to get a year's subscription to PsychFlex, all of that will happen free, and Rick is coming into the app with some of his technology about how to sustain positive experiences through practice and taking advantage of what we know about how your nervous system allows itself to focus more on the fresh water than on the salt that might be in there. If you go back to a classic metaphor that I mentioned a while later, where life is like salty water, and if it's too salty, add more fresh water. And Rick is really brilliant in learning how to do that. So check out the Patreon link. If you're willing to give me even $1 a month, you'll get a cool tool called Plan that you can play with. And this doesn't, you don't have to be a therapist or anything to do that. It applies to your individual personal life. Just try it out. And you can cancel the Patreon thing at any time. So it's basically almost free. But I'm asking for it because the money will go to something important. And do give it a read of the 1,000 randomized trials. But just for fun, you might also look at my Follies contribution that my son and I spent some weeks developing. And that will give you a little sense of the spirit of ACBS if you're a professional, if you've never been. We'll be in New Orleans next summer with an awesome list of contributors and participants. And so come down and sweat with us in July in New Orleans. Meanwhile, I got to catch a plane and go to Purdue and give my son a hug as he goes off into adulthood. Peace, love, and life, my friends.